He nearly died protecting her. The alien queen proclaimed, "My daughter will be yours." Human Captain Leo Carter had seen many things in his years of service. As a soldier in the interstellar peacekeeping force, he had fought in distant planets, handled dangerous situations, and stood between chaos and order. But nothing had prepared him for this. The peace treaty signing on the planet Tavaros was supposed to be a simple, ceremonial event. A treaty that would end years of conflict between two powerful alien factions: the Tivarosians, a proud and ancient race, and the Zenthari, a ruthless species known for their military might. The idea was to put aside their differences for the good of the galaxy, and Leo's task was clear: protect the royal family during the signing. He thought it would be just another routine mission, but everything went wrong. The Grand Hall was a stunning display of Tivarosian culture, with shimmering walls of crystal and floating lights that gave the room an ethereal glow. Leo stood beside the Tivarosian queen, Selvaira, a powerful figure whose presence was both intimidating and graceful. He couldn't help but notice the young alien princess, Liara, standing just a few steps away from him. She was only 18, but there was a strength in her gaze, something that set her apart from everyone in the room. She wasn't just a royal heir, she was the future of her people. Leo's duty was to stay close, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of trouble. He had dealt with many hostile forces in his time, and he knew better than anyone that peace was fragile. But the situation was calm, and Leo allowed himself a rare moment of relaxation, observing the guests mingling and the quiet exchange of formal pleasantries. That peace didn't last long. Without warning, the loud sound of shattering glass echoed through the hall. The doors burst open, and a group of masked assailants stormed into the room, guns drawn. The Tivarosian guards were quick to respond, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Leo's training kicked in instantly. He grabbed his weapon and moved toward the source of the disturbance. His heart pounded as the attackers began firing indiscriminately, and chaos erupted in the hall. Leo pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on the figure of Princess Liara, who had been thrown to the ground in the panic. A shot rang out, missing Leo by inches. Without thinking, he dove toward her, his body crashing into hers as they both hit the floor. The world seemed to slow down in that moment. Leo could feel the weight of the attack, the sudden realization that the lives of everyone in this room were in danger. But his focus was on Liara, the royal heir, the future of an entire civilization. He couldn't let anything happen to her. The next few moments were a blur. Leo was on his feet in an instant, pulling Liara up and shielding her with his own body. He could hear the sounds of blaster fire, but it seemed far away now. All that mattered was getting Liara out of this room. She was his responsibility now. They ran, ducking behind pillars and taking cover where they could. Leo could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His mind raced. How had this happened? How had their enemies gotten in? Were there more attackers outside? The questions flooded his thoughts, but there was no time to answer them. They had to survive first. As they moved through the hall, Leo noticed the queen standing tall, issuing commands to her guards, who were quickly regrouping and trying to contain the situation. But it was clear that the attackers were prepared. They had come with a purpose, and they weren't going to stop until they had what they wanted. Suddenly, one of the attackers broke through the line of defense and came at them. Leo reacted instinctively, grabbing a nearby weapon and firing. The shot landed squarely and the attacker fell to the ground, but it wasn't enough. They were still outnumbered and the Zenthari forces were relentless. Leo turned to Liara, pulling her toward a nearby doorway. He could feel her trembling against him, but there was no time for fear. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. She nodded, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. She was the princess, the future ruler of Tavaros, but in this moment she was just a frightened young woman, and Leo was her protector. They managed to reach the safe room where the queen was already securing the entrance. Selvaira, with her calm and composed demeanor, didn't look like someone who had just been under attack. She turned to Leo with a nod of approval but didn't speak. But Liara, still shaken, looked at Leo with wide eyes. "Why did you do that?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of 1,000 questions. "Why did you risk your life for mine?" Leo paused. He could feel the weight of her gaze on him, but there was no time for deep conversation. He had a duty, a responsibility to protect her, and that's all there was to it. "It's my job," he replied simply, but his voice was laced with a truth deeper than just duty. He had sworn an oath to protect those in need, and in that moment, he would do whatever it took to ensure her safety. The sounds of the attack grew quieter as the Queen and her forces took control of the situation. Leo's heart was still racing, but he forced himself to focus. He had to stay calm, stay alert. There would be time for questions later, but the silence that followed the attack wasn't comforting. It was unsettling. Leo couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that the Zenthari or someone else would be back. The peace that the galaxy had so desperately sought was hanging by a thread. As he stood guard beside Liara, his thoughts wandered back to the Queen's words earlier. There was something she hadn't told him, something important. It was clear now that the attack hadn't been a random act of violence. The Zenthari had targeted Liara specifically. But why? What was it about her that made her such a valuable target? Before he could ponder the question any longer, Queen Selvarra approached them, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Captain Carter," she said, her voice commanding, yet oddly calm in the face of everything that had just happened. "You've done your duty. But you will be staying with us longer than you expect." Leo raised an eyebrow. He was expecting a brief reassignment, perhaps, but nothing like this. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice wary. Selvarra's gaze shifted to Liara, who stood quietly beside Leo. "You saved my daughter's life today," she said. "For that, I owe you a debt, but you must understand, Captain, that you are now bound to her. You will protect her for as long as it takes, and in time you will serve her in ways you can't yet imagine." Leo felt a strange sense of unease settle in his chest. He had expected thanks, perhaps even some form of reward, but this was something else entirely. The Queen's words rang in his ears as he processed the weight of what she had just said. "Bound to her?" he repeated, still unsure of what she meant. "Yes," Selvarra replied simply, her eyes narrowing slightly. "My daughter is the future of Taveros, and she will need someone strong by her side. That person is you, Captain. You've already proven yourself in her eyes." The statement took Leo by surprise. He had just done what any soldier would do, protect those who needed it. But now it seemed as if his actions had set something much larger into motion. What was this debt that the Queen spoke of, and why had she chosen him? Before he could ask any more questions, the Queen turned and walked away, leaving Leo standing beside Liara, his mind racing. It was only then that he realized the true scope of what had just happened. The attack wasn't random, and it wasn't over. The Zenthari and whatever else lurked in the shadows would come again, and this time he would have to be ready. But it was also clear now, his life had changed forever. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something much bigger, something that would force him to face not only the enemies of Taveros, but the deepest questions about his own heart and future. He had saved Liara's life, but what would be the cost of the promise he had made? Captain Leo Carter had never been one to back down from a challenge. As a seasoned soldier, he had faced enemies, treacherous terrain, and impossible odds. But now, standing at the side of Princess Liara, he felt a sense of unease he had never experienced before. He had protected her once without hesitation, but he knew that this was just the beginning. The safe room, where they had taken shelter after the attack, was far from peaceful. The Queen had ensured the room was locked and guarded, but Leo could still hear the distant echoes of the chaos that had unfolded in the grand hall. He stood by the door, his eyes scanning for any potential threat. Liara sat near the window, looking out at the distant horizon, her face a mixture of worry and confusion. Leo felt a strange sense of protectiveness for the princess. She was the future of Taveros, but she was also just a young woman who had been thrust into a position of unimaginable responsibility. He had seen the way she handled the attack earlier with courage, but also with vulnerability. It wasn't something he had expected from the daughter of the most powerful queen in the galaxy. Liara turned from the window and met his gaze. Her eyes were full of questions, and Leo could see the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "Why did you do it?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with curiosity and gratitude. "Why did you risk your life for me?" Leo hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer. He wasn't used to discussing his emotions, especially not with someone like her. But there was something about Liara that made him feel like he could open up, even if just a little. "It's my duty," Leo said, his voice steady. "I'm a soldier. Protecting people is what I do." Liara nodded, but she seemed to be lost in thought, her brow furrowed. "But it's more than that, isn't it?" she pressed. I can see it in your eyes. You didn't just do it because it was your job. You cared. Leo looked away, his gaze shifting toward the floor. He had never really thought about it that way. Of course he cared. He cared about the people he protected. But Liara was different. She wasn't just another person he had been assigned to guard. She was a princess, the heir to a powerful empire, and the weight of that responsibility seemed to affect her more than anything else. I guess I never thought about it like that, Leo said quietly. I just did what I had to do. Liara studied him for a moment as though trying to understand his thoughts. You're not like the others, she said softly. Most soldiers just follow orders, but you. You seem to care about something more. I can see it. Leo felt a strange warmth in his chest at her words. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. He had always been a soldier, and soldiers didn't get praise. They followed orders, protected their people, and did their jobs. That was it. But Liara saw something in him that he hadn't even realized was there. Before Leo could respond, the door to the safe room opened, and Queen Selvara entered, her presence commanding attention. She was a tall woman, regal in her appearance, with eyes that held the wisdom of generations. The queen's gaze briefly swept over Leo and Liara before she spoke. It's time to go, she said in a tone that left no room for argument. The situation is still too dangerous here. We need to leave Tavaros. Leo stood straighter at the mention of leaving. He had been so focused on protecting Liara that he hadn't considered the bigger picture. They couldn't stay on Tavaros, not with the Zenthari closing in and the risk of more attacks. But where would they go, and how would they get there? Queen Selvara seemed to read his thoughts. We have a safe haven, she said, as if answering his unspoken questions. A place where we can regroup and plan our next steps. Leo nodded, though a feeling of unease settled in his stomach. It wasn't just the thought of leaving Tavaros that bothered him. It was the idea of being forced to leave everything he knew behind. His entire life had been about following orders, about being a soldier in a galaxy full of conflict. But now, it seemed, he was part of something much bigger, something that he hadn't signed up for. Liara stood up, her gaze flicking between Leo and her mother. Where will we go? She asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. Selvara's expression softened, but only for a moment. We will travel to the hidden sanctuary, she said. It is a place that has remained untouched for centuries. Only a few know its location. Leo's heart raced at the mention of the sanctuary. The very name of it was surrounded by rumors, whispers of its power and mystery. It was said to be a place of immense knowledge, a repository of ancient secrets. But it was also dangerous. Many had tried to find it and few had returned. You can't be serious, Leo said, his voice low. The hidden sanctuary, that place is a myth. No one knows where it is. Selvara turned to him, her expression unreadable. You may think it is a myth, Captain, but I assure you it is very real, and it is our only hope. Leo didn't argue. There was something in her tone that left no room for doubt. Queen Selvara believed in the sanctuary, and that was enough for him to follow her lead. But part of him couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The Zenthari were relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. Liara was their target, and Leo knew that they would stop at nothing to capture her. What's the plan? Leo asked, his voice firm. How do we get there? Selvara glanced at Liara before responding. We will travel in secret. We will leave the capital in the cover of night, using a transport ship to take us off-planet. From there, we will make our way to the sanctuary. Leo nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. It was risky, but it was their only option. The Zenthari were already hunting them, and the sooner they left Tavaros, the better. The queen turned to her daughter. Liara, you must come with me. We have much to discuss. Liara nodded, her face still clouded with uncertainty. She glanced at Leo one last time before following her mother out of the room. Leo was left standing alone in the safe room, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had signed up to protect Liara, but now, it seemed, he was involved in something much bigger. The fate of Tavaros, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on his shoulders. But there was one thing Leo was sure of. He would not let anything happen to Liara, no matter what the cost. As he prepared to leave the safe room and follow the others, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that the journey ahead would change everything. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of a story that had yet to unfold, a story that would test him in ways he couldn't imagine. And somewhere, deep inside, he knew that he was no longer just protecting Liara. He was protecting the future of the galaxy itself. The journey had begun. After leaving the capital under the cover of darkness, Leo and the Tivarosian royal family made their way to a secluded spaceport. The streets were eerily quiet, with only the occasional hum of distant ships breaking the silence. Leo kept his senses sharp, scanning the darkened streets for any sign of danger. The attack at the peace treaty ceremony had proven just how dangerous things had become. The Zenthari were out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had Liara. The small group was escorted by a handful of elite Tivarosian guards who were well-trained but clearly nervous. No one could predict the scale of the threat they were facing, and every passing moment felt like a race against time. The transport ship that would carry them off to Varos was a sleek, fast vessel designed for stealth. It was the perfect way to escape without drawing attention, but even so, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they boarded the ship, Liara's face was hard to read. The young princess had been quiet for most of the journey. She had been through a lot, and Leo could tell that the weight of the situation was starting to sink in. She was no longer just the heir to the throne. She was now a target, and everyone's safety depended on her. "Are we safe here?" Liara finally asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. She stood near the window, looking out at the darkened sky. The stars were distant pinpricks of light, but the endless expanse of space felt more like a void, one that seemed to swallow them up. Leo hesitated, not wanting to lie to her. "For now," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We'll be on the move soon. No one will know where we're going." Liara didn't reply, but Leo could see the doubt in her eyes. She was young, but she was sharp. She understood the stakes, even if she didn't fully grasp the dangers they faced. Leo had seen it before, young leaders who had the weight of their world on their shoulders, and it often took them a long time to come to terms with that burden. The Queen, Selvara, entered the ship's main cabin, her presence immediately commanding the room. She had been silent for most of the journey, her mind clearly focused on the path ahead. She moved with purpose, and Leo couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She was the mother of the princess, the ruler of an empire, and yet in that moment she seemed like any other person on the run. "We leave now," Selvara said. "The Zenthari are closing in on us. The sooner we leave Tivaros, the better." The tension in the cabin was palpable. The ship's engines hummed to life as the doors sealed behind them, and the vessel began to lift off the ground. For the first time since the attack, Leo allowed himself to relax just a little. The worst was over for now. The ship was fast, designed to make long journeys in a short amount of time. The crew of Tivarosian pilots worked efficiently, navigating through the stars with ease. Leo stood by the window, watching the planet disappear behind them. Tivaros was a beautiful world, full of life and history, but now it was nothing more than a distant memory. The galaxy was vast, and he knew that this journey would take them far from everything they knew. As the ship traveled deeper into space, Leo couldn't help but think about the sanctuary. It was said to be a place of incredible power, a place that could offer them the protection they needed. But there were so many questions. Why had the Queen chosen to go there? What did she hope to find? And most importantly, what was the secret that Liara was carrying, a secret that seemed to make her such a valuable target? He turned toward Liara, who was sitting quietly, her face pale in the dim light of the ship. She had been through so much in such a short time, and Leo could see that she was struggling with the uncertainty of it all. "Are you okay?" Leo asked, his voice soft. Liara looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "I don't know anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was supposed to be safe. I was supposed to live a life of peace, but now everything's different." Leo understood. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to be thrust into a situation like this, to have your life turned upside down overnight. He had chosen this life, the life of a soldier, but she hadn't. Liara had been born into this world of politics, of power, and now she was running for her life. "You're not alone," Leo said firmly, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. "We're all in this together." Liara looked at him, a flicker of something softening her gaze. She nodded, but the doubt still lingered in her eyes. The ship continued its journey through the stars, and Leo stood by, watching the vast emptiness outside. He had no idea where they were going, what they would find at the sanctuary, or what the future held. But he knew one thing for sure. He had a duty to protect Liara no matter what. Hours passed, and the ship traveled deeper into the unknown. As the crew made their way through the vast expanse of space, Leo felt the weight of the journey settle in. They were far from home, and the unknown dangers ahead seemed almost impossible to face. But they had no choice. The Zenthari were after them, and the galaxy was full of enemies who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ship slowed down. The engines hummed to a stop, and the crew began to prepare for landing. Leo's attention snapped back to the present. They were almost there. "Prepare yourselves," Selvara said, her voice strong and unwavering. "We are about to enter the sanctuary." Leo stepped forward, his hand instinctively going to the weapon at his side. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that the sanctuary wouldn't be a place of safety, not yet anyway. There was always danger, always a new challenge to face. The ship descended, its landing gear touching down on the surface of an unknown world. Leo's eyes narrowed as he looked out the window. The landscape was barren, the ground covered in rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. It didn't look like the safe haven they had been promised. It looked like the edge of nowhere. "We're here," Selvara said. "This is the hidden sanctuary." Leo's mind raced. They had arrived, but the real question was, what would they find here? Before he could think further, the hatch opened, and a cold wind swept through the cabin. The sanctuary was not what he had expected. It was a desolate place, far removed from the grandeur of Tavaros. The air was thick with silence, and the rocky terrain stretched out before them. "Stay close," Leo warned, his instincts on high alert. This place was as mysterious as it was dangerous, and he wasn't about to take any chances. As the group stepped off the ship, Leo kept a close eye on the surroundings. The hidden sanctuary might be their only hope, but it felt like it was hiding more than just its secrets. There was something off about the place, something that didn't sit right. Liara walked beside him, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice echoing in the silence. Leo didn't have an answer. He could only hope that the answers they were seeking were here, hidden within the desolate landscape. But even as they moved deeper into the sanctuary, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them. Something dangerous. Something that might change everything. The hidden sanctuary was nothing like Leo had imagined. The moment they set foot on the barren planet, he knew they were not just entering a place of refuge. They were stepping into the unknown. The landscape stretched out in every direction, rocky and harsh, with jagged peaks rising in the distance. There was no sign of life, no warmth, no comfort. It felt cold and deserted, a place that had long been abandoned by time. The air was thin, and Leo could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on him. He had been in dangerous situations before, but this felt different. The world around them felt like a forgotten corner of the galaxy, where no one dared to venture. Liara, walking beside him, glanced around with wide eyes, her face full of confusion. "Is this really it?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The hidden sanctuary." Leo didn't answer at first. He wasn't sure what to say. They had come here seeking safety, but there was something about this place that didn't sit right with him. It wasn't just the desolation, it was the feeling that they were being watched. The air seemed thick with mystery, as though the planet itself was hiding something. And he couldn't shake the feeling that danger was closer than they realized. Queen Selvara, who had been silent since they landed, turned to face the group. Her calm demeanor remained intact, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a sense of urgency that Leo couldn't ignore. "Stay close," she said, her voice low but commanding. "We need to move quickly. The sanctuary is not far, but it is hidden. We must find it before they find us." Leo nodded. He had no questions for the queen. There was no time for questions. The Zenthari were still out there, and every second they spent standing still was another second the enemy could use to track them down. He glanced at Liara, who seemed to be holding herself together, but Leo could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She had been thrust into a world of danger and politics she never asked for. Her life, her future, was no longer just hers to control. It was in the hands of forces much bigger than her. They began to move forward, walking through the rocky terrain. The wind howled through the narrow canyons, and Leo could feel the cold biting into his skin. The path ahead seemed endless, with no sign of civilization. There were no buildings, no signs of life, only the rugged landscape stretching out in every direction. As they walked, Leo kept his senses sharp, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. He knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. The Zenthari could be anywhere, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Liara was their target, and Leo's job was to make sure she didn't fall into their hands. The group moved in silence for hours, their footsteps the only sound in the vast emptiness. The further they walked, the more Leo began to wonder about the sanctuary. Why had Selvara brought them here? What was it about this place that made it so important? And what was the secret that Liara carried, the power that made her so valuable to the Zenthari? They reached a narrow pass in the canyon, where the walls on either side were high and steep. The path was barely wide enough for them to walk through, and Leo felt a sense of unease settle over him. There was no way out. If the Zenthari or any other enemy forces had found their way here, they would be trapped. Selvara seemed to sense Leo's discomfort. She stopped at the entrance of the pass and turned to face him. "We are close now," she said, her voice steady. "This is where the sanctuary begins. The entrance is hidden, but we must remain cautious. The sanctuary is a place of great power, and not all who seek it are welcome." Leo nodded, but the words didn't sit well with him. He had always been a man of action, a soldier trained to protect and defend. But now he was in a strange land, following the queen through a rocky desert to a place that no one seemed to understand. There were too many unknowns, too many risks. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. Liara, who had been walking quietly beside him, spoke up. "What do you mean by not all who seek it are welcome?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Selvara's eyes softened, but her answer was firm. "The sanctuary is not just a place of refuge," she said. "It is a place of great power, and it will test those who seek it. Only those who are truly worthy can enter. Those who are not, they will be rejected." Leo glanced at Liara, who looked even more uncertain now. She had no idea what kind of test awaited her in the sanctuary. Neither did Leo. But they didn't have a choice. They had to go forward. They had to find the answers that would save them and the galaxy. They continued along the narrow pass, the walls growing closer on either side. The air grew colder and the wind began to pick up. Leo's instincts told him that something was wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. He turned his head, scanning the canyon for any sign of movement, but the landscape was empty. Still, the sense of danger grew stronger with each step, and then, as if on cue, the ground beneath them shook. Leo stumbled, his heart racing. He grabbed Liara to steady her, his eyes darting around in a panic. "Get ready," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Something's coming." Before he could react, a deafening roar echoed through the canyon, sending a chill down Leo's spine. He turned to face the source of the sound, his weapon ready. Out of the shadows, something massive appeared, a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a towering figure, its skin rough and jagged like the stone walls of the canyon, its eyes glowing with a fierce, otherworldly light. Leo instinctively raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Selvara stepped forward, holding up a hand. "Do not shoot," she said, her voice calm and commanding. "This creature is a guardian of the sanctuary. It is bound to protect those who are worthy." The creature moved closer, its heavy footsteps echoing through the canyon. Leo couldn't help but feel the weight of its presence. It was enormous, easily towering over the group. Its eyes locked onto Liara, and Leo could see a flash of recognition in its gaze. It knew who she was. The creature stopped a few feet away from them, its massive form casting a shadow over the group. Leo couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was no ordinary creature. It was a protector, a living testament to the power of the sanctuary. Selvara stepped forward, her hand still held out. "We seek refuge in the sanctuary," she said. "We come in peace." For a long moment the creature stared at them, its glowing eyes fixed on Liara. Then slowly, it lowered its massive head, bowing in a sign of respect. The air seemed to hum with energy, and Leo felt a strange sensation wash over him, a feeling of both fear and reverence. The creature stepped aside, its massive body parting to reveal a hidden entrance in the canyon wall. The stone was smooth and shiny, as if it had been carved by an ancient hand. Leo's heart raced as he realized they had found the entrance to the sanctuary. But as they approached, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them inside, something powerful, something dangerous. Liara looked at the entrance with a mixture of awe and fear. She was about to step into a place that held the answers to everything. The secret to her power, the key to saving the galaxy, and the truth about who she was. But was she ready for what awaited her? Leo didn't know. But he knew one thing for sure: they couldn't turn back now. The sanctuary was their only hope, and they had to face whatever lay inside. With a final glance at Liara, Leo stepped forward, his mind set on the journey ahead. They were about to enter the sanctuary, and nothing would ever be the same again. The entrance to the hidden sanctuary stood before them, a silent and imposing gate carved into the rock. The massive creature that had allowed them entry now moved aside, its glowing eyes never leaving Liara as if it recognized the weight of her presence. Leo stood at the front of the group, his senses on high alert. His hand never left the weapon at his side. Though the creature had shown them a strange form of respect, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that danger was still lurking, waiting for them in the shadows. Liara stepped forward, her eyes filled with wonder and fear. She had come here seeking answers, but as they approached the entrance, Leo could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She wasn't just the future of Tavaros, she was the key to something much bigger, something beyond her understanding. He could only imagine what she was feeling, carrying the weight of a galaxy's hopes on her shoulders. The entrance to the sanctuary was smooth and unmarked, almost as if it had grown naturally from the rock itself. No signs, no symbols, just a perfect, hidden doorway that seemed to blend into the landscape. Leo hesitated for a moment, unsure of what they might find on the other side. The sanctuary was not just a place of refuge. It was a place of ancient power, a place that had been hidden from the galaxy for centuries. Selvara, always calm, stepped forward with purpose, her eyes scanning the entrance. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence was commanding, and Leo could feel the tension in the air, as if they were on the verge of something momentous. This was it. They had come all this way, and now they were about to step into the heart of the unknown. "Are you ready?" Leo asked Liara, his voice soft but firm. He had to be the one to hold things together for her sake. She nodded, though Leo could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't ready for this, not in the way she thought she was. The truth about her power, about the sanctuary, was something she had yet to fully comprehend. "I think so," Liara whispered, her voice barely audible, "but I don't know what to expect." Leo placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her a reassuring smile. "None of us do," he said. "But we'll face it together." With a nod from Selvara, the queen stepped forward and placed her hand on the stone of the entrance. A faint pulse of light ran through the rock, and the door slowly began to open. The sound was like a soft hum, a low vibration that seemed to echo in Leo's chest. The air around them seemed to grow thicker, charged with energy, as though the sanctuary itself was awakening to their presence. As the entrance opened fully, the group stepped inside, and Leo's breath caught in his throat. The inside of the sanctuary was nothing like he had imagined. The walls were lined with glowing crystals, their light flickering like stars in a dark sky. The air was thick with the scent of ancient dust and something else, something unfamiliar, almost otherworldly. The space was vast, stretching far beyond what Leo could see. The floor was smooth and cold underfoot, and there were no visible doors or exits. Just an endless cavern of stone and light, as if the sanctuary itself had been built by beings who had long since vanished. It was a place of mystery, a place of power that held secrets older than the galaxy itself. "Where are we?" Liara asked, her voice echoing in the vastness of the chamber. Selvara's eyes scanned the space, a faint smile crossing her lips. "This is where the heart of Tavaro's power lies," she said. "It is where the true essence of our people resides. But it is not a place for the weak. It will test you, Liara." Leo felt a shiver run down his spine at the queen's words. He had heard stories of places like this, ancient sanctuaries that tested the worth of those who entered. But this was different. This was the sanctuary that held the key to Liara's power, the very force that the Zenthari were hunting, the power that could change the course of the galaxy. Selvara moved ahead, her steps confident and purposeful. Leo followed closely behind, his eyes never leaving Liara. She walked beside him, her face a mixture of awe and fear. The weight of her destiny was heavy, and Leo knew that no matter what happened in this place, her life would never be the same again. As they walked deeper into the sanctuary, the walls seemed to shift, the glowing crystals flickering in a strange, rhythmic pattern. It was as if the sanctuary itself was alive, aware of their presence. The deeper they went, the more Leo felt the weight of something ancient pressing down on them. The energy in the air grew thicker, charged with an unexplainable force. "Do you feel that?" Leo whispered to Liara. She nodded, her eyes wide. "It's like the air is alive, it feels." Powerful. Selvara stopped in front of a massive stone altar, its surface covered in intricate carvings and glowing symbols that seemed to shift and change as they looked at them. The carvings depicted scenes of ancient Tivarosian history, battles, victories, and moments of great significance. But there was one symbol that stood out, a symbol Leo recognized from the royal crest of Tavaros. It was the mark of the essence of the stars, the very power that Liara was said to control. "This is where it begins," Selvara said, her voice low. "The essence of the stars is not just a power, it is a force that binds the galaxy together, and it resides within you, Liara. You are its vessel." Liara stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the altar. Leo could see the conflict in her eyes. She had always known that she was destined for something great, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. The power that Selvara spoke of wasn't something Liara could control, not yet. It was something much bigger, something that could either save or destroy the galaxy. "I don't understand," Liara said, her voice trembling. "How am I supposed to control something like that?" Selvara placed a hand on her shoulder, her expression softening. "You don't need to control it, my daughter. You need to learn how to let it guide you. It will show you the way, but only if you are willing to listen." Leo watched as Liara took a deep breath, her eyes closing as if she were trying to calm herself. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for the burden of the essence, but there was no turning back now. The air in the sanctuary seemed to grow even heavier, and Leo felt a strange pressure in his chest, as if the very walls of the place were closing in on them. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain: the future of the galaxy rested on Liara's shoulders. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The light from the crystals flickered, and the symbols on the altar began to glow brighter, casting strange shadows on the walls. Leo's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The sanctuary was responding to Liara. It was awakening, just as the queen had warned. "Stay close," Leo shouted, his voice urgent. He reached for Liara's arm, pulling her back. The energy in the air was intensifying, and he knew that something was about to happen. But what? A voice echoed through the sanctuary, a voice that seemed to come from all directions at once. It was deep, ancient, and full of power. "Who seeks the essence?" the voice asked, its tone both commanding and resonant. Selvara stepped forward, her eyes closing in reverence. "We seek the guidance of the essence. My daughter, Liara, is its chosen vessel." The voice was silent for a moment before it spoke again. "Then she must prove her worth. Only the worthy may claim the essence. If she is ready, she will be tested." The ground shook again, and the altar began to glow with a blinding light. Leo instinctively stepped in front of Liara, his hand on his weapon, but Selvara stopped him with a gentle touch. "Do not fear," she said softly. "This is part of the test. The essence will not harm her. It will only show her the truth." The light from the altar grew brighter, enveloping Liara in a warm, golden glow. Leo could see her face, her expression, a mixture of awe and fear. She stepped forward as if drawn by an invisible force. The energy in the sanctuary was building, and Leo felt the air crackling with power. Liara reached out her hand, and the moment her fingers touched the altar, a surge of energy shot through the room. The ground beneath them trembled violently, and for a moment everything seemed to stop. Then, in an instant, the energy released. The light faded and the room was once again still. Leo blinked, disoriented by the sheer power of the moment. He turned to look at Liara, his heart pounding in his chest. She stood there, her eyes wide, her body trembling, but there was something different about her now. Something had changed. She wasn't the same girl who had stepped into the sanctuary. She was more. She was the key to the galaxy's future. The essence had accepted her, but the real test was only just beginning.